Four friends find a remote beach where shadows come from the sea, whispers fill the waves, and ghostly figures protect an old curse. As they explore, they must survive the spooky forces or become the next lost legends. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the serene beach. Emily and her friends, Mark, Sarah, and James, had decided to spend the weekend at this secluded spot, far from the bustle of city life. They set up their tents near the edge of the forest that bordered the sand, ready for a night of campfire stories and laughter. As dusk fell, the group gathered around the fire, the crackling flames dancing in the growing darkness. Mark, always the jokester, began telling a local legend he had heard from a fisherman in town. "There's a story about this beach," Mark said, his voice low and eerie. "They say it's cursed. A shipwreck happened here 100 years ago, and the spirits of the drowned sailors haunt these shores. They call it the Beach of Shadows because at night their shadows rise from the sea and roam the sands." Sarah scoffed, but a shiver ran down her spine. "Come on, Mark, you're just trying to scare us." Mark grinned. "Maybe, but don't blame me if you see shadows tonight." The group laughed, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. As the fire began to die down, they decided to take a walk along the shoreline. The moon was full, its pale light reflecting off the waves, creating an almost magical atmosphere. They wandered down the beach, the cool sand beneath their feet. Suddenly, James stopped, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. "What's that?" he whispered, pointing toward the water. The others followed his gaze and saw faint, dark figures emerging from the sea. They looked like shadows, but they moved with an unnatural fluidity, drifting silently toward the shore. "Is this some kind of joke?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "It's not funny, Mark," Emily added, but she could see the fear in his eyes. The figures grew clearer as they approached, revealing gaunt faces and hollow eyes. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew thick with an unexplainable sense of dread. "We need to get back to the camp," Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. "Now!" They turned and ran, the sound of their frantic footsteps mingling with the crashing waves. As they reached the campfire, the shadows were almost upon them. Emily tripped and fell, her heart pounding as the figures closed in. Mark and James pulled her to her feet, and they all huddled together, watching in horror as the shadows stopped just short of the dying firelight. The apparitions stared at them with empty eyes, their presence cold and menacing. For what felt like hours, the friends remained frozen in terror until the first light of dawn began to break. As the sun's rays touched the beach, the shadows slowly dissipated, retreating back into the sea. Breathless and shaken, they gathered their belongings and left the beach as quickly as they could, vowing never to return. The legend of the Beach of Shadows had proven to be more than just a story, and the memory of that night would haunt them forever. The sun was setting over Whispering Bay, casting a golden glow on the waves that gently lapped the shore. Natalie and her friends, Kevin, Lisa, and Ben, were excited to spend a weekend at the old beach house that had been in Natalie's family for generations. It was the perfect getaway, isolated and serene, with the nearest town miles away. As they unloaded their bags and settled in, the house creaked and groaned, a testament to its age. The air was thick with the smell of salt and seaweed, and an eerie calm seemed to hang over the bay. Nightfall brought with it a chorus of waves whispering against the shore, a sound that Natalie had always found soothing. But tonight it seemed different, almost as if the waves were trying to speak. After dinner, they gathered on the porch, the darkness enveloping them as the moon rose high in the sky. Kevin, always the storyteller, began recounting a tale he had heard from a local fisherman earlier that day. "Have you ever heard the legend of the Whispering Waves?" Kevin asked, his voice low and dramatic. "They say that decades ago, a shipwreck occurred just off this coast. The captain was a ruthless man, known for his cruelty and greed. He drove his ship into a storm, desperate to reach a hidden treasure he believed was buried somewhere around here. The ship sank, and everyone on board perished. Now, on quiet nights, you can hear the voices of the drowned sailors carried on the waves, whispering secrets and calling for help." Lisa shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "That's just a story, right?" "Maybe," Kevin replied with a grin, "but they say if you listen closely, you can hear them." Curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to take a walk along the beach. The moonlight illuminated their path, casting long shadows on the sand. As they walked, the whispering grew louder, an unsettling chorus that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Do you hear that?" Ben asked, his voice barely audible over the whispers. "It's just the wind," Natalie said, though she didn't believe it herself. The group continued, drawn inexplicably toward the water. The whispers grew clearer, almost like voices murmuring just below the surface. Kevin stopped suddenly and pointed out to sea. "Look!" In the moonlit waters, they saw shadowy figures, barely discernible but unmistakably human-like, floating just beneath the waves. The whispers intensified, turning into desperate pleas for help. "We need to go back," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "Now." As they turned to leave, Natalie felt a cold hand grasp her ankle, pulling her toward the water. She screamed, and the others rushed to help, pulling her free from the invisible grip. They ran back to the house, the whispers following them, growing louder and more frantic. Once inside, they bolted the doors and windows, huddling together in the living room. The whispers continued outside, now accompanied by the sound of tapping on the windows and doors, as if the spirits were trying to get in. The night was a sleepless one, filled with the eerie sounds of the Whispering Bay. As dawn broke, the noises ceased, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. They packed up their belongings and left the beach house, the haunting whispers echoing in their minds. Natalie sold the beach house soon after, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, of hearing those ghostly whispers in the dead of night. Whispering Bay had claimed another group of visitors, and the legend of the drowned sailors lived on, a chilling reminder of the bay's dark history. The wind howled through the palm trees as Emma, Jake, Laura, and Sam stepped off the small boat onto the shores of the forgotten island. They had heard rumors about this place, a remote island, abandoned and left to the elements, shrouded in mystery. The allure of an uncharted adventure was too strong to resist, so they had decided to spend a weekend exploring the island's secrets. The beach was pristine, untouched by human hands for decades. As they set up their camp, the air was thick with the scent of salt and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The island seemed welcoming enough, but an uneasy feeling lingered just beneath the surface. As night fell, they built a campfire and settled in. The flickering flames cast long shadows on the sand, and the stars above seemed impossibly bright. Jake, always the thrill seeker, pulled out an old journal he had found in a second-hand bookstore. It was said to belong to a sailor who had once lived on the island. "Listen to this," Jake said, flipping through the pages. "This journal is filled with stories about the island. According to this sailor, the island was once inhabited by a small community, but everyone disappeared without a trace. They say the island is cursed." "Cursed?" Laura scoffed, though she couldn't hide the unease in her voice. "Come on, Jake, you don't actually believe that, do you?" Jake shrugged. "Who knows? But it's a good story, right?" They laughed it off and decided to explore the island the next day. As they settled into their tents, the wind picked up and the sound of the waves grew louder, almost as if the ocean itself was whispering secrets to the island. The next morning, they ventured into the dense jungle that covered most of the island. The air was humid and heavy, and the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves created an eerie symphony. They stumbled upon the ruins of what appeared to be an old village, dilapidated huts overgrown with vines, and remnants of a once thriving community. "This place gives me the creeps," Sam muttered, looking around nervously. "Let's keep moving," Emma suggested, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. As they explored deeper into the jungle, they found a clearing with a large ancient stone altar in the center. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, and a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Emma reached out to touch the carvings, and as her fingers brushed the stone, a chill ran down her spine. "We should go back," Laura said, her voice trembling. But before they could leave, the ground beneath the altar began to tremble. The symbols glowed with an eerie blue light, and the air was filled with an otherworldly hum. The friends watched in horror as ghostly figures materialized around the altar, spectral forms of the island's former inhabitants, their faces twisted in agony. "Run!" Jake shouted, and they bolted back toward the beach, the spectral figures in pursuit. The jungle seemed to close in around them, branches clawing at their clothes and slowing their escape. The ghostly whispers grew louder, filling their ears with unintelligible words. They burst out of the jungle and onto the beach, collapsing in the sand. The spectral figures stopped at the edge of the trees, their hollow eyes staring at the intruders. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of the crashing waves. Breathless and terrified, they hurriedly packed their belongings and boarded their boat. As they sailed away from the island, the wind carried faint whispers to their ears, a haunting reminder of the island's dark past. They never spoke of the forgotten island again, but the memory of that night stayed with them forever. The island remained a mystery, its secrets buried beneath the sands and the jungle, waiting for the next group of explorers to uncover its cursed history.